Good morning. I know Member Becton is on her way. Oh, here's Member Becton. Great. Okay, we've got Member Becton. Terrific. Good morning and welcome to the July 17th Victim Compensation Board meeting. For those of you in the room that are appearing on a specific agenda item or wish to offer public comment, the microphones at the podium and tables are directional and require that you hold them fairly close to your mouth when speaking to ensure your testimony is captured by our audio equipment. For members and participants who are appearing via Zoom, if you cannot hear the presenter, please use the comment feature to note that as staff are monitoring the comments in real time. Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton.
Present.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Chair Ravel.
Present.
Good morning. Item 1 is the approval of the minutes for the May 15th, 2025 board meeting.
Is there any discussion, additions, or corrections to the minutes from board members? A motion to approve item 1?
Move to approve.
I second.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Seeing none, council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration before the board is approval of the May 15th, 2025 meeting minutes. Member Becton.
Aye.
Missed one. Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item is number 2, public comment. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. As any items discussed during public comment have not been agendized, the board is not permitted to take any action on these matters at this meeting. Please note, if you wish to offer public comment regarding item 6, there will be a separate call for public comment when the item is heard by the board. For those on the phone, if you previously indicated your desire to offer comments during this meeting, we will be calling on you by name or phone number. For those participating via Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to offer comment, and we will like.
Oh, I'm very sorry to everybody who heard that. This is extremely upsetting. Extremely upsetting. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I don't see any hands up. So I think we can move on to our next item.
Thank you. Item 3 is the Executive Officer Statement, which will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill.
Morning, board members. Again, apologies for that. Again, we try to use technology to the benefit of many people, and sometimes it has unfortunate consequences. And so we will continue to work to prevent that from happening again. I wanted to just give the board a few updates. The state budget was signed on June 27th, and CalVCB did receive positions within our legal division to help with our appeals backlog. So we are working quickly to fill those positions and make progress on working on the appeals process. And we also continue to monitor the federal climate. We have not yet received this year's grant distribution request, but we do expect that any day now. And we continue to work with the administration on this as we suspect that there will be conditions placed on this grant that the administration may not want to agree with. And so we continue to work on that path forward. I will say that the way that our grant process works is that we draw down grants from 2 years prior. So there's no imminent budgetary threat to the organization if that grant is delayed in any way. I wanted to let the board know that we are starting the process for 2 state audits. The Joint Legislative Audit Committee approved on June 18th an audit on the state's victim restitution system at the request of a lawmaker. This includes CalVCB, the Department of Corrections, CDCR, and FTB as part of the audit. Their stated request was due to concerns over how restitution is collected and distributed, including garnishment practices, transparency, and fiscal efficiency. Specific to Cal VCB, the objective includes how eligibility decisions are made and the status and outlook of the restitution fund. During the hearing, it was clear that there's some confusion about the nexus between restitution and compensation. We just want to make it very clear that victims qualify for compensation regardless of the existence or status of a restitution order. There is also going to be a routine state controller's office audit on the Prop 47 grant program. That's the Safe Neighborhood and Schools funds that funds the TRC. This is a regularly scheduled audit, and the kickoff for that is in August. The public hearing for the regulations, proposed regulations on appeals and income loss was held on June 16th. The many members of the public attended virtually, and Cal VCB, we are reviewing all of the comments to see what, if any, updates we might need to make to the regulations. I also wanted to let the board know that we're making progress on our equity and accessibility strategic planning goal to improve language access and remove that barrier for victims. Plain language updates have been made to almost all of our forms and outreach materials, and we are translating these materials into 15 different languages. We'll post that to our website when they're available. A key example of the effort that we've undergone is a document we have, which is a benefit resource guide. We've lowered this from reading level from grade 15 to grade 6 and reduced it from 6 pages to 2. We think this will help both providers and those who use our services as well as victims to better understand what benefits they are eligible for. And on speaking of plain language, I presented on that topic at the National Association of Crime Victim Compensation Board annual conference, which was held in late May in Salt Lake City. Well-attended session. This was an opportunity for those who pay out compensations nationally to get together. It's the only event where only compensation managers all get together and talk about the issues that we're facing. How to translate the work we do into plain language is it's an often well-received topic, as everyone faces the same challenges. And especially given the national situation, it was helpful to talk to other states and learn what they knew about how the federal government was planning to proceed with the grant this year. Lastly, I'll just say that we talked at the beginning of the year that this year marks our 60th anniversary, and that actually is here in July. And so I just wanted to take another opportunity to remind everyone that we were the first compensation program in the country. We are extremely proud of the work we do and really thank the staff here at Cal VCB for all of their efforts to help victims in the state. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Executive Officer Gledhill, and congratulations on 60 years. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
Chair, if I may, just a quick question about the federal grant funding. You said that the organization operates on about a 2-year, on the previous 2-year grant. So in terms of when there might be funding impacts, if there were changes to that grant, we'd be looking 2 years out. Is that effectively?
I'm going to say yes, with the understanding that I think we don't know what exactly could be happening, but at the moment, we do draw down, we have to have claims to be able to draw down those funds. So we get reimbursed essentially for claims we paid, and then we draw down from the grants. And so yes, we are currently drawing down on the grant from federal fiscal year 2022, 23, but I guess and so we would presume that nothing will change in our process in the next year or so, that we could continue to draw down on those previous grants,
Right.
As we have historically done the entire time since that grant was formulated, with the caveat that I don't know if things could change in a way that they haven't in the past.
Yeah, I mean, obviously things are very unpredictable in that regard. So I appreciate the situation that we're all in here, and just would encourage you to, plan for any eventuality, right?
I will
That's-
just say,
y'all are the-
yeah, I will say that our statute has a provision in it that if we don't receive federal funding, we could drop the maximum payout for victims from $70,000, which it's currently at, to $30,000. That's never been used. So again, I think it would be a conversation about how that would be implemented if that came to pass. And so I don't have an answer, but there is a provision that allows in our statute that would allow for that kind of eventuality. Whether or not that's the direction we would, go, I don't know, but that is something that is in place.
And just one last follow-up question. Would that conversation come to the board then, or would that be a staff or?
Again, we're dealing with unknowns. So I think that at a minimum, the board would be informed. I think how we make that decision and how it would be enacted is something that we have not faced before. So I would not be able to answer that question at this time.
Thanks, I appreciate you.
Thank you. Item 4 is a legislative update, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Katie Gardinas.
Good morning. The legislature begins its summer recess tomorrow and will return on August 18th. I would like to highlight the status of a few key bills. AB 379 by Assemblymember Schultz would require CalVCB to award grants to community-based organizations that provide direct services in areas with a high concentration of sex trafficking. The bill was passed by the legislature on Monday and is on the governor's desk. AB 938 by Assemblymember Bonta would allow an individual who committed a violent crime while a victim of human trafficking, intimate partner violence, or sexual violence to apply to have their sentence vacated. This may result in a decrease in restitution collections, as any restitution that was imposed would also be vacated. This bill passed out of the Senate Public Safety Committee and is scheduled to be heard in the Senate Appropriations Committee on August 18th. AB 1100 by Assemblymember Sharp Collins would have made significant changes to the victim compensation statutes. This bill was held on the suspense file in the Assembly Appropriations Committee and will not move forward this year. And then finally, SB 470 by Senator Laird would extend the current provisions governing the use of teleconferencing for public meetings by a state body until January 1st, 2030. That bill passed out of the Assembly Governmental Organizational Committee and was referred to the Assembly Appropriations Committee, where it will be heard in August. Those are the highlights, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Cardenas. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none.
Member Becton. Oh, you can please come on up. Yeah.
Let the record reflect at 10:20 a.m., Member Becton joined in person rather than via teleconference.
All right, I think we're ready for item 5. Oh, sorry.
Okay, next we have item 5, which is the contract report, and it will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Sean Ramirez.
Good morning, board members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So for today's contract report, it is informational. It consists of the awards to the trauma recovery centers and standard operating contracts for information technology and postal items. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Deputy Ramirez. Are there any questions for Ms. Ramirez?
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we will move to item 6, is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Humberto Duran, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
On January 24th, 2025, Umberto Duran filed an application with the California Victim Compensation Board as an erroneously convicted individual. That application was based on his 1994 convictions for murder and attempted murder, which were vacated by habeas relief in 2024. In April of 2025, the court found Mr. Duran factually innocent of these crimes within the meaning of Penal Code Section 1485.55. As mandated by the court order and pursuant to that same Penal Code section, the proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $1,485,120, which represents $140 per day for each of the 10,608 days Mr. Duran was wrongfully imprisoned. Throughout these proceedings, Mr. Duran has been represented by Megan Baca of the California Innocence Advocates, and I believe Jarrett Adams is present today. And then the Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney Generals Jonathan Kraus and Seth McCutcheon.
Thank you, Counsel. We'll hear first from Mr. Adams.
Thank you and good morning to the board. Just want to thank all parties involved with conceding to Mr. Duran's innocence in his petition for the board. He was having a bit of phone trouble, so he's joined now listening in on my cell phone, and he wants to extend his gratitude to everyone involved in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Would Mr. Duran like to address the board?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Duran.
The board for the decision and because of the justice was finally served, and I'm very grateful for everything. And there's no words to even express myself how I feel, other than I thank everybody and my staff, my lawyers, and for everything. And once again, thank you.
And I also want to state, to the board as well that this act and this compensation is going to go a long way in helping Mr. Duran recover. Right now he's undergoing therapy and trying to pick up and put the pieces, of his life back together. He was released released to the same home in which his wrongful arrest and conviction stemmed out of. So again, we just extend our thanks and hopefully we can, give Mr. Duran closure.
Thank you, Mr. Adams and Mr. Duran. We'll hear now from Mr. McCutcheon and Mr. Kraus from the Attorney General's office.
Thank you. The Attorney General's office agrees with the proposed decision.
Thank you, Mr. McCutcheon. Is there any discussion of this item by the board? Do I have a motion on item 6?
I move to adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Humberto Duran.
And I'll second that motion.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Seeing none, counsel, please call the roll.
The motion before the board is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Umberto Duran. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, counsel. The board will now convene into closed session under Government Code Section 1126 sub C 3 to discuss numbers 1 through 226 of the Victim Compensation Program.
Thank you again to this board.
The board is reconvening into open session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126 sub C3. Do I have a motion for numbers 1 through 226, accepting number 12 of the Victim Compensation Program? But number 12, yeah.
I move to approve items number 1 through 226 with the exception of item number 12 of the Victim Compensation Program.
I will second that motion.
Council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is approval of numbers 1 through 226 of the Victim Compensation Program with the exception of item number 12. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Council. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board today? Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn until the afternoon?
Move the meeting be adjourned.
And I'll second.
Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again at 1 o'clock. Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon portion of the July 17th Victim Compensation Board meeting. For those of you in the room that will be presenting or wish to offer public comment, the microphones at the podium and tables are directional and require that you hold them fairly close to your mouth, speaking to ensure your testimony is captured by our audio equipment. For members and participants who are appearing via Zoom, if you cannot hear the presenter, please use the comment feature to note that as staff are monitoring the comments in real time. Please note that after each presentation, board members will have an opportunity to ask the presenters questions. As we want to ensure there is adequate time for all the presentations and meaningful discussion about all topics, we have allotted time at the end of the agenda for public comment and discussion. Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton.
Present.
Member Cohen. Chair Ravel.
Present.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Item 1 is the welcome and opening comments from the board. Public comment will be taken after the scheduled presentations.
Thank you. This special meeting was called because of discussion during the March 2025 board meeting when the board approved TRC grant awards for this fiscal year. We look forward to learning more about trauma recovery centers, the funding, and the grant administration process. Thank you to the presenters and the TRCs that have joined us today in Sacramento and via Zoom, and we look forward to our discussion. To start, I'd like to ask our executive officer for any opening remarks.
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank the board members for attending, but I also especially want to thank our staff for putting this meeting together. It was a first for our organization to put together an informational meeting. I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into it. I also want to thank all of our presenters who came to appear here in person and also on the Zoom. As you all know, the Trauma Recovery Center grants continue to be a challenge as funds requested continue to disproportionately increase compared to the funding available. Additionally, many organizations are interested in becoming trauma recovery centers because of the great work that they do for victims across the state. Our hope today is that the board can learn from stakeholders, experts in the TRC operations, learn about the funding situation and the grant administration process. And we look forward to additional discussion with the board on how to move forward before we post the notice for the next funding cycle this winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Officer Gledhill. Are there any comments from our other board members before we begin the presentation? Thank you.
Okay, first let me say, I'm not going to say any last names because I don't want to butcher anyone's names. But the next item is 2 presentations on the Trauma Recovery Center model. The first presentation is from Alicia, who is...
Excuse me, Andrea, sorry. Member Becton does have a comment. I'm sorry.
Never mind.
Sorry. Well, we had an opportunity to give opening and welcoming remarks, and so too close? No. Oh, a little closer. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. And I want to start by welcoming each of you to today's hearing and expressing my deep appreciation for your presence, your insights, and for your unwavering commitment to supporting victims and survivors of crime. California has long understood that real justice for victims of crime requires more than just legal remedy. It also demands meaningful trauma-informed care to help survivors heal, to rebuild, and to thrive. And so the Trauma Recovery Centers, or our TRCs, are at the heart of that vision because you offer comprehensive services and provide to victims and survivors and their families who might not otherwise have those resources available and who might struggle alone. So you're providing a bridge to them between the justice system and the path to restoration and hope. And so it's an opportunity for us today to hear directly from the people and the organizations who are on the front lines of this work. And so I want to acknowledge the important concerns that many TRC centers have raised. Unfortunately, as you all know, we're facing some real fiscal challenges coming up. The Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Fund, which was established using the savings from Prop 47, is projected to decrease due to the passage of Prop 36. And in addition to that, the funding provided by the Budget Act of 2022 should begin to expire this year. So given those realities, I am especially grateful for the chance to better understand every aspect of the grant process, including the scoring criteria, the methodology used, and the steps that we can take to ensure that our process is open and fair and transparent. So I hope today's conversation moves us closer to that goal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your dedication to the victims and survivors. And thank you in advance for your candid input and your commitment to strengthening this partnership. I want to thank as well the Cal VCB staff who worked hard to provide a space for this important conversation and for the work that you do every day to assist victims and survivors. I'm looking very much forward to this constructive dialogue today. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Victon, and please accept my apologies for moving on without you. And Member Cohen has some remarks as well.
I do. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I realize I may be a new face for those of you that are regulars in attending this this body, but I am the state controller. This body is one of 70 different boards and commissions that I do sit on. Usually I'm represented by my deputy, Evan Johnson, who is in the audience today. But I, just a little bit about my background. I'm from San Francisco, spent 8 years on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, served also as on the 4 years on the California Board of Equalization, and now I'm in my 3rd year of my first term as the state controller. And I'm going to be listening to not only the fiduciary arguments. I mean, I understand, I'm the controller. I understand that we are in a budget crisis. I understand how the money flows and moves throughout the state of California. And also, sadly, understand how the impacts of federal policies are impacting our great state, our local economies. One of the things that I'm going to be critically listening to is the distribution of resources, who gets what and how much. And I'm hopeful for those that are not in the chamber today, and those that are with us online, that they also speak up and share their thoughts, comments, and experiences and insights, because hard times don't last forever. We will, as I was sharing with the chair, I've been thinking of different strategies on how we begin to beef up the funding. And one of which I believe is really developing a very strong champion, either members in the legislature or in the governor's office, to just go ahead and write us into the budget, particularly when we are flush with more cash. So there's some, I think, some proactive things that we could also be doing. But for me today, I'm going to be listening and learning a little bit more about this particular program. I'm very interested in the TRC program, not because it was founded in San Francisco. I don't want you to think that I'm biased in any way. However, I am impressed that it does come from my hometown, and not surprised. But I am disheartened to learn, when I think about communities that are in the Central Valley, that they are under resources, but that yet the demand is there and persists. So, Mr. Chair, I turn it back over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Cohen. Item 2.
Okay. Item 2 will be 2 presentations on the Trauma Recovery Center model. The first presentation is from Alicia, who is a University of California, San Francisco professor and the founder of the National Alliance of Trauma Recovery Centers. She is presenting with Stacy, who is a LCSW, who is the director of the Training and Technical Assistance Program at the NATRC.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Alicia Basilari, and I'm the founder of the UCSF Trauma Recovery Center model and the National Alliance of Trauma Recovery Centers. I'd like to thank you all for giving us a chance to talk to you about the model. I would also like to thank for being a partner to the Trauma Recovery Center model since it was 2001. It is because of this partnership and the support of the state legislature that survivors of violent crime from underserved communities now have increased access to much needed services. This model of care that was created and nurtured in California is now being replicated across the country in 55 locations across 15 states. I thank you for this partnership. My co-presenter is Stacy Wagal, who is the director of the NATRC Training and Technical Assistance Program. We'll be offering you an overview of the TRC model, but later in the session, when the focus shifts to discussing the grant management piece, I hope that we'll be given a chance to jump back up and talk during that discussion piece as well. So I've been thinking back around how this whole journey began. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been affiliated with San Francisco General Hospital and UCSF for a very long time. San Francisco General is a level 1 trauma center, which means all the severe injuries, particularly victims of violent crime, end up at San Francisco General. And a long time ago, the head of surgery, Dr. Bill Schechter, made a comment to me in passing. He said, "We can sew them up, but we can't make them well." And of course, what he was referring to was the medical and surgical interventions that kept victims of violent crime alive. But when we did a follow-up on these patients, we found that their lives had been shattered, and many were dealing with both the physical and, very importantly, the psychological aftermath of violent crime. Many were having difficulty returning to work. They were spiraling into financial hardship, homelessness, and having family problems, and they were overcome with nightmares, flashbacks, and other symptoms of PTSD. Many of these victims, in fact, the majority of them, were from underserved, low-income communities. We know that poverty and violence go hand in hand. Typically, these victims were given a referral to a local mental health agency, and we'd keep our fingers crossed that somehow they would be able to engage in services. Back in 1997, we actually began a pilot to look at how we might be able to help. We thought we had a great idea, but in fact, we made so many mistakes along the way. At first, we began approaching these victims at bedside when they were still in the hospital. We offered them mental health services and said we would be happy to see them on their discharge from the hospital. But much to our surprise, they refused. As it turns out, there were 2 issues at play here. There is such a stigma to this day around receiving mental health services, and it was pretty typical when we would approach them. They would say to us, "I'm not crazy," and we would be sent away. And secondly, one of the symptoms of PTSD is avoidance, and this includes avoidance of talking about what happened. So we did what we should have done from the beginning. We actually met with the survivors, we did focus groups, and we said to them, "What is it that you need? How can we help?" And they responded. They needed help with practical assistance, getting safe housing, financial entitlements, childcare assistance, and help in filing police reports and talking to the police and the district attorney's office. They also needed help in accessing victim restitution funds. So with this feedback, the TRC model began to take shape. If I could have the first slide. Okay, actually the second one. So the TRC model recognizes that the most harmed are the least helped, and we aim to remove barriers to care and to transform services for survivors of violent crime. In terms of barriers along the way during that pilot, and this is old data, and I know some things have changed, but in the early days, we filed 190 victim restitution applications, only to find out that only 21 of those applications were approved. The majority were denied because victims were unwilling to file police reports, and they were also denied because the applications were considered to be incomplete. We recognize that many victims did not have timely access to the services that they needed. The pilot study continued and the model evolved to include, which Stacy will talk more about, assertive outreach, case management, and evidence-based mental health services. Based on our preliminary findings, the state legislature in the year 2001 funded us to become a demonstration project for the state, directing us to complete a randomized treatment trial comparing the TRC model to usual care. This treatment trial demonstrated that the TRC model is clinically and cost-effective. In recognition of the effectiveness of this model, California moved to replicate this model across the state. And I'm going to turn to Stacy right now, but if we could skip over the next slide, which is slide 3, and also slide 4, and then it'll be ready for Stacy. Thank you.
Okay, is that working? Can you hear me okay? Whoops. How about now? Is that better?
Close. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, better. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
And like Alicia, I just want to acknowledge the board and appreciate this opportunity to provide a brief overview of the model. Next slide, please. So the Trauma Recovery Center was developed back in 2001, as we've been discussing, in San Francisco, in partnership with the CalVCB. And it was designed to be a one-stop center that would provide comprehensive support to survivors of violence throughout their recovery process. TRCs are set up to provide confidential support in a trusted and community-centered environment. Next slide, please. The TRC model was developed to effectively serve survivors who were falling through the cracks of traditional victim services and were also not well served by traditional mental health services and their emphasis on talk therapy alone for the treatment of PTSD and trauma. Rather, this model was developed to focus on engaging and serving survivors in marginalized communities and underserved areas, to serve survivors of a recent victimization. Typically, that's within the last 3 years of the trauma, becoming a part of those essential safety net services in a community that can really prevent the negative impacts and downward spiral that can accompany being a victim of violent crime. Initial focus also on safety and stabilization. And TRCs serve a specified community, whether that's a city or a county or a zip code, and that is so they always have the capacity to provide in-person services to survivors they're working with, although many now also offer telehealth services, which has increased accessibility. And we also work with survivors who aren't already in other mental health services or duplicative services. Next slide, please. And what also really sets this model apart is the non-siloed approach. So there's no wrong door. If you've been a victim of any of these types of violence or have lost a loved one to homicide, you can get help or services at the TRC. And this is in recognition that most people who come to the TRC have experienced 5 or 6 different types of violence before ever seeking help or services. Next slide, please. TRC is also, again, really focused on that assertive outreach to individuals. So in addition to whatever community outreach and community engagement events they might also be holding, TRC staff have the ability to work outside the four walls of the center. They can see someone at their hospital bedside, at their home, or elsewhere in the community that feels safe to them. And that really helps with that building trust and rapport that's both essential for engagement in services and an essential component of healing from trauma. We work very collaboratively with survivors, and we want to know what's important to them, and that's the priority for us too. We start with that and where's the most important place to them to start. Next slide, please. The mental health impacts of trauma, no matter who you are, can be absolutely devastating and very destabilizing. And so TRC mental health services are comprehensive accordingly and really able to serve individuals who are facing complex challenges. So that includes the ability to offer crisis intervention as needed, crisis debriefing, also that trauma-focused and trauma-informed psychotherapy, a lot of psychoeducation, a lot of information about trauma and its impacts, and also about coping. And we have a strengths-based approach to the work. So this survivor that we're working with has tools, has resources, has strategies, and we want to know what's been working for that person and how we can shore that up and add additional tools to their toolbox. A critical part is also that access to medication evaluation and management, psychiatric medication, because for some people that is a critical part of being able to engage in these services and avoid the long waits in community mental health of access to psychiatry. Many TRCs also do family work and group work. Next slide, please. This graphic on the client flow at the TRC just kind of illustrates that there are generally multiple entry points throughout the community for referral into the TRC. And that when someone is referred, they receive a comprehensive biopsychosocial intake assessment that identifies both the mental health and case management needs. And that's what allows the TRC team to develop this individualized, survivor-centered plan of care. And then while someone is in services at the TRC, they're able to leverage the community partnerships that the TRC has built. And the TRC becomes the single point of contact for care coordination and for helping to access and navigate all of the different resources that someone might need to connect to or be connected to already, or the different systems that someone might be navigating. These community partnerships are also essential at the time when someone is well enough to be discharged from the TRC, but might have some additional needs. They can be accessed at that point from community partners as well. Next slide, please. These services are provided by a multidisciplinary, culturally diverse staff, which takes time and resources to recruit and hire. The core staffing is mental health clinicians. Many times that's master's level mental health clinicians, whether they're social workers, MFTs, LPCCs, at least one psychologist, access to a psychiatrist. Many TRCs also have case managers, outreach workers, other types of peer support, may have someone helping them manage their data, may also offer a clinical training program to be able to hire into the TRC and also expand the field of trauma work. And of course, then having the language capacity also to meet clients and populations that they're serving. Next slide, please. And what we see over and over again when a TRC opens in a community is that TRCs really do bridge the gaps in victim services. That often traditional victim services office at the DA is one of the biggest referral partners for a local TRC. But other partners include hospitals, primary care clinics, law enforcement, often domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers, schools. Again, many entry points throughout the community. TRCs are also inclusive of people who don't go through the criminal justice system and don't file a police report, or at least initially don't file a police report. And that removes a significant barrier to care and services for many people. They also have been demonstrated to serve people of color and people experiencing homelessness at higher rates, and to increase access to victim compensation to help people with the application process, meaning that more people get access to those benefits who are young or who have less education. Next slide, please. This is an evidence-based model, and so it's why our training and technical assistance support supports fidelity to this model and the 11 core elements of it, so that TRCs across our network can achieve similarly positive outcomes. And that includes significant increases in the rates of engagement in services and significant decreases in mental health symptoms, particularly PTSD and depression, that really translate into a better quality of life for survivors. Because when you're no longer suffering from PTSD or depression, you're able to return to work sooner, and you're able to maintain your housing, and you're able to show up for your children and your family and your loved ones in the ways that you want to. Next slide, please. You can just see in this graphic that these impacts hold across different TRCs that have been studied. This is an example from Long Beach TRC and UCSF TRC that shows similarly high rates of PTSD and depression, much higher than on average for people accessing community mental health services coming into the TRC, and similarly very significant decreases in those symptoms after an episode of treatment at the TRC. Next slide, please. We now have, as you can see from this map, that the TRC model has been adopted by California and also in 14 other states. And this national network enables survivors of violence in these 55 communities across the country to get access to this comprehensive care and support that the TRC model offers. It also really enriches our community of practice and what we have to offer through the NETRC. Next slide, please. And there's more information available about that and all that we have to offer, as well as our manual on our website, the netrc.org. Next slide, please. I'd also like to mention training and technical assistance, because that's been an important part of our partnership with CalVCB over the last 3 years. For new TRCs, we are able to meet with new grantees very soon after the award and talk about the multidisciplinary staffing model. We can share hiring and recruitment strategies. We have sample tools such as job descriptions that really helps them get up and running sooner and be able to meet that requirement of opening their doors to serve clients within 30 days. The team offers 7-week TRC implementation workshops in a peer learning cohort, so that programs get oriented to the 11 core elements of this model with other TRCs. There might be in different places in the state, or they might be in different parts of the country, and that allows for multi-directional learning in our community of practice. We have a lot of resources to share. We also support new TRCs developing their 6 essential protocols for operating a center, so that, again, they're really well positioned to succeed and to have fidelity to this evidence-based model. They also get to participate in ongoing facilitated peer learning cohort meetings. Next slide, please. And all TRCs that we work with get access to training and technical assistance too, through our NRTRC Center for Learning, which is our online learning management system that offers self-paced training. We have a lot of resources to share there as well. And continuing education units are available on the Center for Learning too. The NETRC facilitates statewide and national community meetings, allowing TRCs to come together, share best practices, share challenges, brainstorm with each other, and learn from each other as well about innovations in the work. And that we also offer free trainings, at least quarterly, in evidence-based therapies for the treatment of trauma. That's one of our focus areas. Another is using culturally responsive approaches and interventions. And then also, due to the challenges of this work, managing vicarious trauma and strategies for sustaining provider wellness and longevity in trauma recovery work. The team also provides targeted support for the TRCs for supervision and training, for data collection, and for leadership at TRCs. Next slide, please. At NETRC, our vision is a world where every survivor of violence gets the help they need to heal. And we do appreciate the partnership of CalVCB in manifesting that vision in California. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bocelleri and Ms. Wiggall, for the presentations and also for the incredibly important work that you're doing. I think results speak for themselves that you presented, Ms. Wiggall. It's really impressive for some of the neediest people in our society. So thank you for being here with us today. Are there any questions or comments from our board members? Okay. Right. Then I think we'll have our next presentation.
The second presentation is from Carrie, who is the Executive Director of the Napa Solano SANE SART-TRC. She is presenting with Melissa, who is the Victim Services Director of the Napa Solano SANE SART-TRC.
Thank you so much. Is this on? Can you hear me? No. How about now?
Quick test.
Really close. Okay. No. Yes. Not sure.
Hello.
This is working. Sorry. Thank you so much for allowing us to present today. My name is Carrie Cordero. I am the Executive Director of SANE-SART, which does stand for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners Sexual Assault Response Team. I will add I'm also a psychiatric nurse practitioner and a sexual assault nurse examiner. And I will let Melissa introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Nixon, and I'm the Victim Services Director. And I've been with SANE-SART since 2018, and I'm currently a master's social worker going for the LCSW. TRC has inspired me.
I would also like to add that Dr. Julia Rusholt is here in the audience. She is our TRC Clinical Director. Next slide, please. So Napa Solano SANE-SART, it's much easier to say SANE-SART, although people don't understand what that means. But we are a victim services organization or nonprofit agency that has been around since the 80s, providing forensic examinations for sexual assault victims, domestic violence forensic exams, child forensic interviews, and we also have a human trafficking advocacy program. Next slide, please. In 2018, we absolutely saw a need for an increase in mental health services for victims of violence. And that's when the Solano TRC was established in Solano County. So Solano County is a smaller Bay Area county, kind of northern, with certainly very low philanthropy and increased marginalization. What we have seen from our experience is an absolute direct referral from services. So I may see a child or an adolescent or an adult for a sexual assault exam and can do an immediate referral for mental health therapy, which has really been so impactful for people. Getting them into services as soon as possible after the crime really helps mitigate symptoms. I will add that in 2022, we were one of the TRCs that was not awarded after an application. That created a lot of a stir, I will say, and we were given the opportunity to reapply and were then awarded for a lesser amount. In 2023, we applied for one of the expansion grants for Northern California, and at that time decided to increase services in Napa and Sonoma counties, being next to us, which really kind of kept the decreased funding in Solano County. We were able to maintain our core functions with that expansion grant. Next slide, please. Pretty average in Solano County, we see about 200, 250 clients a year. So that's not the total services. Also using the 16 session model, but we see about 200 and 250. One thing that we have learned, and especially with the expansion grant, where we look at Napa and Sonoma counties and their crime rates, and particularly because I have access to their sexual assault rates, we went into that grant thinking we were not going to have high numbers. I will show you in a future slide, we were absolutely proven wrong. And what we realized in Solano County, it is far more marginalized, and the basic needs are greater in Solano County than they are in Napa and Sonoma. Meaning, if you can't pay your PG&E, your rent, or have groceries on the table for you and your family, accessing mental health is definitely at the bottom of that. And so we are especially grateful that we were able to use the fee cap money. And I'll let Melissa speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, the fee cap money was a godsend, truly, because we used every dollar of it also. Our clients that come to us, they're coming on quite possibly the worst day of their life, and their partner may go to jail, who's their provider for their home, and they have no money to pay their bills. So that fee cap was able to save so many situational issues that our clients faced, which would maybe make them homeless. So we were able to pay rent. We were able to help them with food, with clothing, with transportation, at the same time of them being able to access mental health therapy and get their children, because we do have a child therapist on staff as well, which is tremendous because when we're serving the families, oftentimes the children are affected as well by the violence that they've experienced in the home. So fee cap has literally been a godsend at our agency. We don't know what we would have done without the fee cap because, especially in Solano County, we do see a lot more poverty, and the basic needs are the first thing that you have to meet these clients with.
Next slide, please. And so the expansion grant, to mimic what Melissa said, absolutely a godsend with the decreased funding we received from our Solano TRC. So we were able to keep those core services. So we just finished it in June, and we opted to be housed in family justice centers. So the Monarch Justice Center in Napa County, as well as the the Family Justice Center of Sonoma County, and really work with victim service providers. So the district attorneys, victim witness programs, rape crisis, DV shelters, but also really that hub being the Family Justice Center was really huge for us. And that's where almost all of the referrals came from. Next slide, please. And next slide. That just shows crime rates. So as I was alluded to earlier, in less time, we have seen, and you would think like, oh, it's 2 additional counties, you're going to have more people, but they are more rural counties. But they absolutely showed up with the referrals and people accessing services and getting the therapy that they needed. Much to my surprise, really thought we would have much lower numbers. We saw a huge increase or need for bilingual therapists, particularly Spanish, which we were able to meet those needs. With the expansion grant, we were able to hire or contract with a lot of local LCSWs, MFTs to provide those therapy services. Next slide, please. So some highlights for us, obviously the funding, looking at Solano County having such low philanthropy rates, with concern and worry from what is going to happen with federal funding or even local and state funding. We are absolutely grateful for the continued funding. I also feel like Cal VCB, or being able to do that direct referral for clients that we see, whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and getting these families into therapy is absolutely pivotal. And them being able to show up to our office and then knowing they can come to the same office for therapy is really helpful. So they can meet with their advocate and their therapist if they need to, kind of both playing different roles in the family's healing journey. I will also add the Cal VCB staff has been absolutely incredible. Our grant liaisons have always been really kind and helpful. If we have a question, no problem, like that's answered. And I think that has also been really pivotal. Next slide. So recommendations that we have. I do feel that established TRCs should have some type of leg up when they are applying for or reapplying for funding, because it is a disservice to the community to have a TRC and then not fund a TRC in the future. We are now a hub for so many people, and it takes multiple years for the community to learn who you are. And we still, having been around for 7 years, people still don't know who we are. And so I don't know what that looks like in terms of grant applications with the NOFA, but I think there should be some type of bonus, like extra points or something for somebody that, and that should say compliant, not complaint, but for somebody that, you know, is doing what they said they were going to do with their funding. Next slide. And then I will just share our limitations right now. So we are in a new award, and we did receive the maximum benefit, so $2.2 million. However, the goal is to have that for one county, and we are now using that across 3 because of the expansion. Again, I do not feel it is fair to the community to start services and then to pull back. And so we will have some limitations in terms of core therapy positions. We will have less flexibility in contracting with local therapists in the community. We will still be there and we'll still provide services. They will just be limited. And next slide, I believe that's it. Yeah, and so this was our Napa grand opening at the Monarch Justice Center. I have a beautiful staff, team of folks. And so thank you so much for allowing us to present. Do you have anything to add?
No, I didn't have anything to add, but I did want to just share a quick story of something that was very touching to me, even upon yesterday. And just to show the impact that TRCs have in our community. We have a neighboring city in Solano County, Vallejo. Many of you may hear about Vallejo on the news. There's a high rise of human trafficking, which we do serve in that capacity, as well as poverty and gun violence. And there was a teenager that died from gun violence. And we were literally able to wrap around services within a day. With our relationships, with our reputation in the community, we were able to talk to a victim witness advocate to immediately get them contacted with Cal VCB so that funeral costs can possibly be taken care of course, if they meet the requirements, and immediately provide crisis management with the family, with the siblings. And we're going to continue to carry with that family, with the children and the parents. And so it just showed me what an impact that TRCs have in our community and how extremely important they are, from domestic violence all the way across to something like this that's happened. That's so tragic. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Nixon and Ms. Cordero, and thank you also for presenting and for the extremely important work you do. I think the last story you shared, Ms. Nixon, is just you're finding people in some of the worst situations and giving them what they need to be as complete as possible going forward. So thank you for that. And your points are well taken about what we can consider for the future. We've heard it from a number of people about TRCs, I should say, about giving extra consideration to established TRCs, and that is something that we're looking at. And thank you also for recognizing the work of the staff at VCB and how helpful they've been. That's certainly the level of service that I expect from all our staff. So I think Member Cohen has a question.
Thank you. So I have a couple follow-up questions to your presentation. You mentioned that Sainsart received funding one year and then was denied the next year in funding. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
We applied, we were not awarded.
Right. What was the reason for the denial? What was given?
Based on a point system, we did not, gosh, if it was a few years ago, do you remember?
It's a scoring system. It's a ranked scoring system. So I don't recall that particular year, but that's how the board makes the final determination. But that's how the determination.
So I assume that when you reapplied the next year, you made whatever corrections needed to be made. Was it a new person filling out the paperwork, or?
Yeah, we actually reapplied.
Mhm.
So there was a big appeal process.
Mhm.
And then there were 3 TRCs that were not funded at the time or funded again. And we were given the opportunity to apply again, and then we were awarded at a lesser amount. And I believe based on the total, like, allocations for each TRC that year may have changed for all of them.
There was a year where it is a competitive grant process, but there was a year where the board did not accept the staff recommendation, and we came back a few months later with a new set of recommendations that included TRCs that already were existing. They just all received fewer dollars because of the amount, we were spreading the money out over more trauma recovery centers.
What's your budget?
For TRC.
Yes.
So this, now it's 2.2 million
And
for 2 years. So 1.1 million.
okay. Do you have any other funding sources?
So we do. We're currently in a Child Youth Behavioral Health Initiative grant that just ended June 30th, which was able to supplement some of our child therapy. But other than that,
Solano County.
that's a state. That was a state
State.
grant.
So your budget is heavily relying on state money.
Very much so. Yes, 75% of our budget.
So, all right. And that other 25% is made up of fundraising, federal dollars, I don't know, philanthropy.
I wish there was more, but fee for service, because we
Oh.
do contract with local law enforcement for our forensic examinations that our examiners do.
Okay. Right. Do you have to turn people away?
We never turn anybody away, but at times we have had a wait list. And when there is a wait list, we have a case manager that will check back in on folks to make sure they are doing okay, and they can just kind of providing them updates along the way.
What's the average length of time that a new person, I'm coming in to you for services. What's the average length of time that a person would be under like your treatment or coming for support?
So we do mirror the UCSF model of 16 sessions, so 4 months with extensions based on how they're doing clinically.
Okay, all right. And I think I heard you say Sansart's been around for 7 years.
So our TRC program,
TRC program.
yes, since 2018.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions?
Thank you, Member Cohen. Member Becton, any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I appreciate the recommendations.
Thank you. Item 3 is an overview of the funding structure and outlook for the TRC grants, which will be presented by Justin, Deputy Secretary of Fiscal Policy and Administration at the Government Operations Agency.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Justin Howard. I am the Deputy Secretary for Fiscal Policy and Administration at the Government Operations Agency. And I do want to start off by just saying how touched I am hearing all the great work that's actually going on in the trauma recovery centers. It's quite impressive, despite the tough funding outlook that I'm about to describe for you today. So I want to thank everyone who's involved in this and all the work that you've done. It's truly amazing. The trauma recovery centers are within VCB. The program receives funding from additional, basically 3 different areas, right? You have your restitution fund. There's a statute that's out there that basically says that is the intent of the legislature to provide $2 million annually to VCB for the trauma recovery center program. I will note that is intent language. It doesn't have to be $2 million in theory. It could be more. I will note, though, that the restitution fund in and of itself is in a very bad situation. Ever since we did public safety realignment back in 2011, the restitution fund is essentially insolvent, meaning it's overprescribed in terms of the programs that it's funding, and the Department of Finance routinely provides a general fund backfill to help fill the gap for the restitution fund.
I have a lot of questions.
And I will do my best to answer all
I
these.
know you will. Was it an act of the legislature that did the public safety realignment?
Yes, and it was actually put onto the ballot as well at the time. So it was guaranteed. It's basically, it shifted a lot of felony convictions from state incarceration to county incarceration. And it moved funding as well. There was a variety of other public safety programs that were part of that. I don't have all the details in front of me, but can definitely get it to you. It would require a change to several ballot measures
No,
to
who put
adjust.
that on the ballot? Do you recall who put that on the ballot?
It was the legislature as part of under Jerry Brown's administration when he first came in. When we were looking for ways, obviously, to coming out of the Schwarzenegger very tough budget years, they were looking for savings and trying to right size the budget at the time. And this was one of those efforts that they thought that the counties would provide better services to inmates if they could stay closer to home. And as well as make changes to parole and establish a new type of local supervision for various probationers and people coming out of state prisons. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Again, it's just intent language though. So, but they do get the $2 million every year. But in theory, somebody could decide if they wanted to provide more than that. It would just put cost pressures on the general fund.
If that decision were made, is the funding available to increase the $2 million?
Well, like I said, the fund is already overprescribed. So whatever you add to it, it just basically increases the amount of the general fund backfill that finance would have to provide to the fund. The other funding source that VCB has received, they've received a general fund appropriation before, a one-time general fund appropriation for the program. In theory, that could happen again. The legislature could decide to provide additional funding on a one-time and or ongoing basis for the program. Those are definitely things that are within their purview. The one that's probably most troubling and probably the biggest topic of conversation that people want to talk about is what is the impact on Prop 47 funding and how does that impact VCB? So essentially what Prop 47 did is it changed several crimes and resulted in state savings. So by basically changing wobblers and certain crimes to misdemeanors, it means less people were going to state prison. It resulted in savings to the Department of Corrections. Finance each year is required, and they do it twice a year. They do it once at the governor's budget, and they do it again at the May revision, is they estimate the amount of savings that is generated from Proposition 47. And of that savings calculation, 10% is slated to go to this program. So what has happened since in the more recent near term is Proposition 36 then came along, and that kind of overruled some of the changes related to Prop 47. It essentially created a new type of felony that results in more people going to prison, and then it eroded some of the kind of shifted back to prison some of the crimes that otherwise would have been resulting in savings to the state. What this has done is it has had a significant decline in the projection of those savings, which means if you're getting 10% of a smaller share, your budget is declining quite significantly. So I'll give you some numbers. So in 25-26, the projected savings as a result of Prop 47 was $88.3 million. Of that amount, 10% would have gone to VCB for the grant program, which is basically $8.8 million. At the time of the governor's budget last year, finance was projecting that that would decline all the way from 88 to 30.5 million. That is a significant reduction of $50 million in projected savings for Prop 47. At 30 million, that's only $3 million at a 10% cut that's available for the program. That's a very tough decline. That's more than half of your annual amount that you used to get. Furthermore, it's projected to decline even further. So as it fully ramps up, Prop 36 and the impacts of Prop 36, it's going to decline even further. They're projecting it to go down to about 27 million in 27-28. I will say that the LAO has noted that there's some uncertainty to those numbers. They are projections. They don't know the full impact. They don't have the full data yet. So there is a chance that it could be revised in an upward fashion. But those are the numbers that you are kind of facing at this point in time. And it's a very tough situation of what Prop 36 has done to the funding availability for this program. So again, to kind of just recap, you have your restitution fund, 2 million. You can potentially get general fund appropriations to the extent somebody wants to do it. And then you get 10% of Prop 47, which is now a declining revenue source due to the changes of Prop 36. So with that, I'm happy to answer more questions and talk through scenarios and situations related to the budget.
Are you hearing any discussions, political discussions about bringing any initiatives to the voters next election cycle that will restore some of this money? Maybe Prop 47 went too far and they tried to scale it back a little bit with Prop 36, but they might have scaled it a little too much. So it seems to be like they're trying to look for their sweet spot. Have you heard of any?
I personally have not. I have not been privy to those conversations if they have occurred.
Okay, let me ask a question to the staff, if I may. How do you advocate for your budget?
So we are part of the Government Operations Agency under the governor's office. And so we have regular conversations with the Department of Finance and agency about our budget and what our needs are. We are, as just mentioned, we have the restitution fund, which no longer covers all of our victims' compensation payments. So we do receive a general fund backfill in order to make sure that that part of our budget remains whole. And we also, of course, talked about the trauma recovery centers and the Prop 47 funding as it relates to that pot. Obviously, the passage of Prop 36 has put us in a whole new stead for what we're looking for as the future of the trauma recovery centers. We ourselves do not, as part of the administration, we don't lobby, of course, but we would work in concert with the administration, the governor's office, Department of Finance on our needs.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, so the backfill that you receive from DOF, Department of Finance, that is basically to cover the administrative costs, right?
It actually covers victim payments. So we receive about 36 million in general fund backfill, just around 30 million in general fund backfill. And that covers not just administrative costs, it covers victim payments made to victims as well, because the restitution fund no longer is able to cover all of the work that we do in providing compensation to victims.
Now, this is an interesting, I'm going to pose something because you're kind of in an interesting position, right? Because you're left to the whims of the governor. If they want to fund you, you get funded. If they need the money, they take it. Does that sound? Oh, I'm looking at her, but yes, I should be.
I'd like to add, I mean, when you are essentially a general fund department in the state of California, which is essentially what VCB has become as a result of changes over the years as they are reliant on general fund. And as you know, the revenue related to general fund is very volatile depending on how the economy is doing, the top 1% and the earners and the tax structure, right?
The property taxes.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of competing priorities. and VCB gets lumped in with all the other departments that are relying on general fund when making decisions related to available funding.
That's why I was asking, how vociferous of an advocate are you for your budget? Perhaps making rounds to the legislature, Public Safety Committee, making sure that people know what you, I don't know who to look at.
Certainly, we as an organization do meet with lawmakers to tell them about our organization, what we do. That is something that we do regularly. But I guess in part it's the reason you're looking at both of us is because we fall under agency. And so it's really any request that we make go to them first and then on to the governor's office or Department of Finance. So that is the structure that we are with. But we certainly have tried very hard to get the word out about the work that we do.
Now, the other thing that I was thinking of is how do we diversify the streams of income? Are you prohibited from, say, writing a grant to a large family foundation or a philanthropic or agency? For example, I'm thinking of like Silicon Valley Foundation or maybe the San Francisco Foundation for additional funding. Uh-oh, the lawyer speaking. That answers my question right there.
Well, that's a good answer. There's nothing statutorily that would prohibit Cal VCB from taking in additional funds. However, in order to get authority to expend those funds, that would have to go through the budgetary process as well.
Yeah, but that's an accept and amend. I mean, it's a pretty simple procedure that wouldn't. Okay.
Yeah, state departments are allowed to collect grants and funding for philanthropy, and there's a process that's set up for the expenditure of those funds, which usually come with some type of restriction or requirement related to their expenditure. So,
and I just want to say, in terms of this conversation, we absolutely encourage and tell trauma recovery centers that that they should look for outside sources of income as well beyond us, because we recognize that it is volatile, because it is now based on some volatile factors, and we recognize that while the state, whether it's us or Cal OES, may provide a lot of grants that people rely on, that we know that with the federal government situation and the changing of the state budget and the Prop 36, that all of these funds are volatile, and other sources of funding could be sought as well.
I agree. We're just kind of spitballing big ideas here. And so I agree. I could see how it'd be very difficult for you as a general fund agency to go out to foundations or other philanthropic. It's a little bit even out of your league. And one could even argue that it's inappropriate. However, those that are like the TRC that presented in from Solano County, they can then go to on the county level. And I would imagine you'd be a lot more impactful. Now, the slight is that if you say we use San Francisco County, you've got the San Francisco Foundation, you got Fred Blackwell, who's worked in the city and county government for a very long time, very familiar with the trauma center in the Southeast at Zuckerberg Chan. Is that what it's still called? Because you said the general, so I know you're old school. I speak that language too, old, because it was always and always will be the general, right? So that makes sense, right? You think about Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, you got wealth there. But what about the pockets? Fresno, Madera, the Central Valley. What about down in Brawley, Imperial, in the southern parts of the state? Like, I don't know of foundations in that way. And the way corporations are scaling back in their philanthropic dollars, I can definitely see how that would be a problem, and subsidizing and looking for multiple streams of income. That's all I have for right now.
I have one other thought, not that I want to offer it up, but when you look at Prop 47, I mean, at the end of the day, it in theory, it could be changed. So you could look not just at the crimes, but you could also look at the other programs that were funded from the savings. And is there maybe some of those could be shifted elsewhere if there's funding sources in them, which could free up more money in the percentage that could come? I mean, the legislature in theory could, and I believe it would require a 2/3 vote. I have to go back and read the proposition because usually propositions require 2/3 votes to change. But they could change the percentage of funding that comes from the savings to VCB. So those are other things that people could, in theory, advocate for if they would.
Which goes back to my original point about going to the legislature, letting them know, hey, guys, gals, we could use some help here. But then it's touch and go, right? Because then you got the governor who's going to go back and negotiate. I mean, Man, I see the conundrum.
It's a tough spot.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I think your presentation really goes to the heart of the problem here. As long as I've been on this board, the TRC awards have been, what's the right word? I mean, it's just been very difficult. There's just not enough money to go around, and there never has been. And now the problem is worse than ever. And if nothing changes, it's going to continue to get even worse. So it puts everybody in an extremely difficult spot. None of us like being in that position. We as a board don't like not giving the funding that's needed for this program. And the staff don't like it either. We just don't know how there's a way to carve up a dwindling amount of money to come anywhere close to meeting the need that's been described by our presenters today.
I think all done. Okay, we'll move on to the next presentation.
Thank you. Item 4 is an overview of the Cal VCB TRC grant administration process and considerations, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Katie Gardinas.
Good afternoon, Board. As Deputy Executive Officer of External Affairs, I oversee the Trauma Recovery Center grant program. And I just wanted to start by saying that as part of this work, it's been really amazing getting to know the folks that presented to you today, the folks I'm sure you'll hear from during public comment, and seeing the impact of the work that they do. I've had the opportunity to visit a couple of trauma recovery centers. I've worked very closely with the UCSF Technical Assistance Program and learned a lot about the model and the way that it helps victims heal and recover. And so, as the chair just said, on the other side of that coin, it's really difficult with the funding outlook that we have, knowing just how valuable that this program is. And it's very difficult to come before the board every March and make these recommendations about how the funding should go. And so my presentation today is to tell you what the current grant administration process is, and then to share some considerations we've made internally based on feedback we've received from the stakeholders. And after that, I'm really looking forward to the conversation and hearing from the public so we can take notes and figure out how to move forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? First, I'll start with an annual timeline for this process. And so we post the Notice of Funds Available, or NOFA, in December. And before we post this document, our staff always take a look at, based on feedback we've gotten about areas where additional clarity might be needed or where we could provide more information, and we make updates as needed. Grantees typically have 30 to 45 days to prepare and submit their grant applications. And during that time period, we offer the opportunity for written questions, and we provide written responses to those questions. The reason that we do this in writing is because we want to ensure that all of the potential applicants have access to the same information. And then at the recommendation of the board last year, and for the 2025 NOFA process, we also held a Zoom webinar where we walked through the NOFA and highlighted the key requirements that we thought were important for applicants to understand. I want to say that the NOFA, the purpose of the NOFA from our lens, is to provide grant applicants as much information as we can about what are we looking for. It provides a scoring rubric. We're really trying to provide transparency. Our goal is for folks to have as much information as possible so they can submit the strongest applications possible. In February, when all of the grant applications are submitted, we go through the scoring process. Historically, that scoring process has been done by 3 CalVCB staff members who are informed about the TRC model and the statutes. We grade those applications individually first and then come together as a committee to discuss any areas where we might not have agreed. We work those out, and then we come up with a total final score. Those total final scores are then ranked for all of the applications that we received, and we start running different funding scenarios. So like Mr. Howard mentioned, at the January governor's budget, we have some indication of what we think our funding might be. So when we start running those funding scenarios in March, we're looking at how to establish a few things. Our recommendations to the board in the last few years have involved a tiered system. So we try to create tiers that we think are fair and objective and defendable. And then after we have those tiers, we look at percentages within them based on the amount of money we have. How can we make this work knowing what our bottom line is? We've also recommended to the board that they cap funding at a maximum of 2.2 million or 1.1 million a year. And collectively, the tiers, the percentages, and the cap are really so we can bring a recommendation before this board that allows you to fund the greatest number of TRCs possible. If we funded people at or organizations at the amount that they requested, we would end up funding fewer TRCs. So we've been trying to find a strategy that allows us to fund more organizations across the state. After bringing that presentation to the board in March, assuming it's approved, which it has been in the couple of years that I've been here, we then move forward at the May revise once we get final numbers for Prop 47, and we make adjustments to the grant. And the last couple of years, we've had the good fortune of seeing very slight increases in that amount of money. So we've actually been able to make small percentage increases to the grant awards. And then we move very quickly to finalize those grant awards so they are effective July 1st at the beginning of the fiscal year. There's a lot of activity that happens administratively to get those awards done by July 1st. We could go to the next slide, please. I wanted to talk about the criteria that we use to score the grants. And the key takeaway here is really it's based in that UCSF TRC model. Dr. Basilari did really amazing work in getting the model put into statute. It is referenced in statute. Key core elements of it are referenced in statute. And so we take those core elements and put them into the NOFA. And what we ask grant applicants to do is tell us how they, through examples, can demonstrate their experience and ability to meet those requirements. I'm going to share those specific requirements on the next slide. But before we go there, I did want to talk about the scoring criteria as well. So the scoring criteria in the NOFA for the 6 questions, so it's a total of 60 points. There is a score of 0, which means an applicant is not qualified. And if you get a score of 0 on one of these 6 questions, we disqualify people from the process because it indicates that they won't be able to meet all of the statutory requirements. And most commonly, the score of 0 comes up with relation to the multidisciplinary team and organizations not having the ability to have a psychiatrist or a psychologist, or not demonstrating that through their application. A score of 1 to 2 indicates that an applicant is less qualified because their answer provides little or no direct experience. They also may not provide examples. A score of 3 to 6 indicates that they are qualified, and that means that they've shown through their application that they have direct experience, complete knowledge, and they've shared comprehensive examples with us. And then a score of 7 to 10 indicates that they are highly qualified. And in addition to meeting the qualified standard, we also ask that for each qualification question, they clearly state that they can begin providing those services related to that qualification within 30 days. And this was added as a way to actually grant some, it's to acknowledge that the existing TRCs are likely able to provide those services right away. And so we do ask that they clearly articulate that for each qualification question. And we think that this is important because even the existing TRCs, often in their applications, discuss potentially changing their services, expanding them, doing something a little bit different. And so having that indication that whatever they are proposing can be done within that first 30 days, we think justifies the highly qualified score. So that is 60 of the 100 points that we score them for. We also have 40 points that are more administrative. We have 20 points related to a budget worksheet and a budget narrative. And that helps us understand how they plan to spend the money that they're requesting. So it gives us a sense of the salaries for the staff, what they would spend on overhead. There's various thresholds that we ask them to meet to ensure that most of the grant money is going to direct client services. And so that budget information helps us ensure that that grant is going to go to help victims. We also give 5 points for a client flow chart. And the client flow chart's important because it allows us to see how they plan to serve victims. How do they plan to engage them from the community or hospitals? It shows us how they will be referred to mental health services, what other partners or networks they might use, and then how they will ultimately finish the TRC program, what that process will look like. We asked for an organizational chart, and that's 5 points. And so some of these organizations are embedded within larger organizations, so that's helpful for us to know. We asked for a time task plan, which is 7 points. In addition to providing the mental health services, the TRCs also provide outreach and training services. And so the time task plan helps us understand when they plan to meet those outcomes during the 2-year grant cycle. And then lastly, there's an optional 3 letters of recommendations they can submit, 1 point per letter. And with that, we get to the total of 40 points for 100 points in total. So as I mentioned, once we go through that scoring process, we look at how they've ranked at the end and then start going through the process of developing the funding recommendation for the board. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these qualifications that are on the screen are the ones that are pulled from state law, which are informed by the UCSF TRC model. And again, what we are asking folks to do is provide examples of their experience or ability to meet these qualifications. And so you'll see that they really relate to outreach, serving a wide range of victims, providing those evidence-based mental health services, and then being able to use that multidisciplinary team and serve the widest number or the greatest number of victims in a geographic area. Next slide, please. So I wanted to close by sharing some of the considerations and conversations we've had internally based on what we've heard at the board meetings, based on conversations we've had with NATRC and other trauma recovery centers. And so we have considered funding only existing TRCs or providing additional points to existing TRCs. And some of the challenges that we think happen with this particular recommendation, at the end of the day, it comes down to the funding volatility. If you make a commitment to fund all of the existing TRCs, and we're at the place where the fund is the most volatile now, right? We granted $18.4 million this year, and we're looking at a total amount next year of $5 million. We have 9 TRCs that are likely to reapply next year. So making that $5 million, spreading that $5 million across those 9 is going to be challenging, and ensuring that they have enough money to operate and meet the statutory requirements. And so that is definitely, I think, one of the biggest challenges we face, especially as the funding outlook looks the way it does. We also have had conversations about what is an existing TRC. As you've heard, sometimes TRCs receive funding and then they don't receive funding in a subsequent year. So depending on how you define what an existing TRC is, it could widen that pool even more than just the folks who are currently being funded at this moment. And the NATRC may be able to speak to this. I'm not sure if there's other organizations using the model who maybe haven't even received a grant, right? So what is an existing TRC may be a challenge. And then we also struggle with the strong desire to expand this program across the state. So the one-time general fund money that we received made it clear that the legislature was interested in having TRCs in Northern and Central California. They created pilot programs to that effect. And so when we have situations where we talk about only the existing TRCs, it almost feels like there needs to be an analysis, right, of are those existing TRCs in the areas where we believe that they should be? Or are there other organizations we should be considering? And so that is a challenge we see. And then, as I mentioned before, the scoring system, to get into that highly qualified range, that 7 to 10, we really do see that as a current advantage that the existing TRCs have, because they can say that they can operate within 30 days. And they've also been successful before. And so, in this last cycle, we funded 11 TRCs, 9 were existing and 2 were new. And so there was 40-something applicants, many, many more new applicants proportionally did not receive funding compared to existing applicants. We've also heard recommendations about a 3-year grant cycle, and I'm going to come back to the funding again. It's very difficult when we don't know what our funding will look like in the next year to think about allocating it differently. The way we do it right now is meant to be very safe for the existing TRCs because we take the money we know we have and we have it in that 2-year cycle. And it's there, they have it, and then we go into the next year, right? The 3-year cycle is difficult because you add an extra year, which means you're spreading that money even thinner. They have to use it for a longer period of time. And then because it's of state law, we're also concerned about a technical challenge. State government agencies have to spend money within 3 years that it's appropriated, but we are often not done closing out TRC grants until about 6 months after they end. And so we would have challenges paying any expenses that they incurred towards the end of a 3-year grant. And then the last piece I wanted to talk about was the concept of micro grants. As the board knows, we have established a $1.1 million benchmark that we try to get as close as possible to with the money we have for our applicants. And really that's because we have heard from the community that that is the level of funding needed for them to do their jobs well. And so we had conversations at one point about asking them to tell us what's your minimum viability level, what is the least amount of money you would need to implement the model and function. But ultimately that doesn't meet our goal, right? We're concerned that it would cause issues for the TRCs related to hiring and recruitment, which are issues they already face. We're concerned that they may not be able to operate across the entire 2-year cycle, which means that they'd be cutting services for victims towards the end of the grants. And we're also concerned about the potential compromise to quality and to the outcomes that the TRCs currently have. And so for that reason, we have not moved forward with recommending micro grants to the board. I've really appreciated the conversation today. I'm very, very grateful to the panelists, to you all, to my staff, and I'm looking forward to hearing the additional feedback about how we can improve this process. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Deputy Cardenas. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I had a couple of questions, please. One of you mentioned that there was a 30 to 45 day period of time for the applications to be submitted. And I wondered, I mean, I would love to hear, it's not really a question, I would love to hear from some of the existing organizations as to whether that's an adequate amount of time to pull together a meaningful application and submit it, whether there's more time needed and then the question would be, is that a statutorily mandated period or is that some arbitrary period that we think is sufficient? So it would be great to have those questions answered as well.
It's not a statutory requirement. That is an adjustment that we could potentially make by changing our administrative processes. So yes, open to feedback on that.
And I'm using my imagination, but I imagine that most TRCs do not have grant writers or people on staff that can write grant, that are trained to write grants, if you will. So I wondered if there was any technical assistance that might be provided to TRCs in the application process, especially from some of the smaller organizations that simply don't have the resource. So you've got one person trying to do their regular job, and then which is already full of responsibility, and then also trying to fill in the gap of something that really is the responsibility of a professional grant writer. So I wondered if there's any training sessions for some of the TRCs, or if there's any technical assistance that can be provided in the process.
I think that's something that we could consider. At this point, we have clarified the NOFA and answered questions they have about the NOFA, but from a actual grant writing perspective, we currently do not provide any of that technical assistance.
And I do have an appreciation for some of the things that you all have been brainstorming about, some very good ideas that, and a lot of food for thought, because as you mentioned, with each one, there's some drawbacks, possibility of drawbacks. So being careful there. I did wonder with the point system, I know you mentioned that at least 6 of the initial points, so some of the 6 questions, excuse me, came directly from the law itself, but then there are other questions. And I'm wondering within that point system, when you're scoring people, is how much of it can be subjective versus objective?
So the scoring rubric really is meant to help guide that. And again, we try to have folks scoring those applications who are familiar with the model. The scoring system from my lens, and I'll just disclose I'm a scorer on the panel, is pretty objective, and it's definitely helpful once you've seen all of those applications. You as an individual scorer can go back and make sure that you've been fair, and then coming together as a group with two other individuals who have also scored, I think also adds integrity to that process, because if you do have a situation where people's scores are far off, we have that conversation and figure out how to come to resolution to make sure that we're scoring in a way that is consistent.
And then finally, that whole issue of trying to make sure that they're geographically, the TRCs are located, like we'd mentioned, the rural areas, parts of our don't have any TRCs. And I wondered if, just like we were talking about granting additional points, perhaps for existing TRCs, if we have a definition for what that means, if there could also be points awarded. Sorry, if there could also be points awarded by geographic area, so that if in a particular cycle we see that there's areas that don't have any services available to them, perhaps there could be a point system that could take that into account.
So we do have the qualification around serving the greatest number of victims in a geographic area. And when we are scoring that, the TRCs definitely have an opportunity to make an argument about the available services in their community and how the grant money would help expand those services, right? And so at least in my experience, areas that are underserved tend to do really well on that particular qualification. But I think it's something to take under consideration whether or not that 10 points is enough in that particular area. Or again, I think our role here today at this meeting is to really hear from all of you, hear the feedback, and then figure out, take it under consideration and figure out what we can do differently with the NOFA. So I appreciate the idea. And the answer to my question is just to let you know that's currently how we have implemented that concept, right? If you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of services, you do score higher in that particular category.
And I said that was last, but then I had one other, just my
No worries.
my little petty question. and that was, I couldn't, I tried to imagine there are 3 points, I'm sorry, 4 points for the 3 letters, the recommendation letters.
3 points, three letters, 1 point per
3
letter.
letters. So is it a point per letter? Like is it the quality of the letter, or is it simply you get a point for each letter?
As long as it's not a form letter, you get a point. And so sometimes we have seen the exact same language across multiple. And so then in those cases, we typically give 1 point because it's the same letter 3 times with different signatures. But as long as they're unique letters, they're 3 points. That's also something that's optional in the application. If we receive an application with no letters, they can still move forward in the process, where some of the other materials, especially the budget information, is required.
That's really good to know, because I get a lot of requests for recommendation letters, and people will say, "Well, here's a sample," you know. So that's good to know that perhaps we should deviate from those samples.
I have several questions as well. What's the internal review process that this organization goes through to constantly check assumptions, make sure that we are meeting our mark, that the strategy is, the system is working? What is the internal review process?
I would say that internally we are, we talk about this program a lot with the board, to be frank. And so I think that we're pretty cognizant of what we need to be able to bring forward to that we believe is defendable, that is in compliance with statute. As I mentioned, we meet we meet with trauma recovery centers. The grant liaisons on my team meet with them monthly. And so through that process, if organizations bring up concerns, bring up feedback, it's elevated to me so we can consider it for things like making changes to the notice of funds available or other processes. We have a quarterly meeting with trauma recovery centers, all of them across the state. So that's an opportunity to hear from the collective group. I always attend those meetings. We work very, very closely with the UCSF Technical Assistance Program, and we actually have some really exciting work that we've been doing around looking at strategic planning for the trauma recovery centers, around looking at needs around the state and how we could balance those needs and what the potential cost of that would be. And then for some of our other internal processes, I think collectively what we're always trying to do is make sure, especially since this program involves so many external stakeholders, comes before the board, that what we're doing is defendable and accurate.
Do you guys perform any internal audits or
We have
assessments
We have a quality assurance team that's scheduled to do an assessment
of this particular program?
this year, and then the state.
Wait, hold on. Has it happened in prior years, or is this going to be like the first time?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then the state controller's office also audits this program. And so we we just received a job start from the state controller's office a couple of weeks ago. They'll be here in August to look at the usage of the Prop 47 funds in particular. And that is a audit that occurs on a rotational basis. Sometimes they look at us, sometimes they look at individual trauma recovery centers.
Okay. Okay. But it sounds like they're going to be looking at something different. When I was talking about an audit, I meant the application process, the grant cycle. That's the process that I was asking. The SEO, Kim Tarvin and her team of auditors are going to be taking an assessment of making sure you're not wasting or stealing Prop 47 dollars. So it's a little bit of a different angle, but I understand. I get it. How was this award process created? You probably perceived.
I would just say that the history of the TRC predates those of us currently in leadership at Cal VCB. So it is a process that we inherited. I know that it was started again as legislation with UCSF and Senator Mark Leno, who sponsored the legislation to create the program. And so it has developed over those number of years. We have continued to try to refine it to make it as strong as we possibly can. But I don't know that we could tell you exactly, other than I know that they were given the grant, the legislation passed, and you were told start this grant program, and it started. I couldn't give you a full history of how we came to where we sit today.
That's a good question. I was thinking that maybe we should start to look at how you came to understand how the process was created, and then you mentioned you solicit feedback from grantees, people who have applied, anyone in your sphere, because to me it seems like their feedback would be informative as to whether or not the grant cycle is even perceived as being fair. You don't have to comment on that. That's just.
I will say, I think that we're all here today because there have been consistent concerns with the grant process.
Okay.
And so I think based on what happened at the March board meeting, it was decided that this venue was needed and we needed some additional information and decisions from the board to figure out how to move forward, given the amount of feedback we've had.
Now, I saw a map. There were 21 TRCs in California, but 15 other states have TRCs. Maybe we could take a survey and talk to them. What's their process? How are they, because I would imagine they have limited funds too. How are they going about with deciding who gets what and how much?
I don't know.
Well, she's nodding her head. So it does happen, or it can happen?
So we are in contact, and actually we work with most of the 15 states
Okay.
that fund the TRCs. And typically, the way they do it is, I'll give you an example from the state of New Jersey. They do have a competitive grant cycle, but they give 10 points to existing TRCs. So at the get-go,
Mhm.
they start out with 10 points. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is instead of having a grant process, they have when you come up for a renewal of your money, instead of doing a grant, and we all know you can hire a grant writer and say wonderful
Mhm.
things, it's actually done on an application process. So over the last 2 years, please report on how you have achieved your performance metrics. So you actually get renewed based on your performance rather than the quality of your grant writing. I will mention that in California, we have, the Office of Emergency Services, which funds rape crisis centers in California, and they use a similar process. So they don't have all of the existing rape crisis centers that are funded with Cal OES money. When you come up every 3 years, it might be 3 years, it might be every 5 years, you have to basically say, this is what we have achieved. And your funding, you get funded based on the fact that you've done a good job, not based on the quality of your grant writing.
I actually really like that suggestion, making it more quantitative as opposed to qualitative, the quality of the application, the fancy words, and using a little bit more of a data-driven approach to justify who's going to get one. One other, so I have some more questions. You're welcome to stay, doctor. Are TRCs incentivized to grow? So when you look at the map on where TRCs exist, you see them clustered in the San Francisco Bay Area and down in the Los Angeles area, and nothing in Northern California. And let me just say this, Northern California is relative, because when I go up to Del Norte County and Crescent City, they laugh at me when I say I'm from San Francisco and Northern California. So again, that's a relative, but I don't see anything up in that area. You think about, doesn't look like there's Humboldt covered. I don't know. I could be wrong because this map is not to scale. But yes, go
We
ahead.
just have one in Northern California that got approved in the last cycle in Shasta County.
Shasta, okay. So my question is that are they incentivized to grow? Like, hey, look, we don't have anything in the Central Valley. How are we going to get these guys going?
Well, so we do what we can to promote that the NOFA is posted. And I don't know, I'm sure Dr. Bosselaри would like to speak to this again with the funding challenges. I think that
Yeah.
that's been a little bit of a push and a pull, right?
Let's back up for a second. I know there's funding challenges. You don't have to tell me.
Well, I guess what I'll say is we always include it in our external newsletter, which goes to all of the CBOs that we work with. We make sure that we are promoting it on our social media, on our website, on the other venues that we have to get the word out. And so in that vein, the first year I was here, I think we had 15 grant applications that we scored. This last year we had 45, I believe.
And you're probably going to have even more next year because the money is drying up. And folks, let me tell you, you think when Donald Trump gets out of office that our problems are going to be over? No, there is going to be a residual effect of the impact of these policies that are being passed and implemented today. Now, I don't want to go too partisan because statistically there's some Republicans that voted for him in this room. But I just want to understand from a policy perspective that even as he leaves, think about it as an earthquake. It's going to be, there are aftershocks that we may even continue to feel upwards to 10 years. So this is very serious in what we're talking about. And I would submit that you probably will see more. And it's going to be completely competitive. But I want to take a moment and be a little bit of retrospective. When times were good, when we were flush with cash, were there more TRCs in the Central Valley, or are TRCs closing down because of a lack of funding? What's happening on the ground? How long have you been in this role?
Been in this role for 2 years.
Oh, you're new like me. Okay, so I get it. So then I'll put the question out there because I see a couple of folks in the audience behind you nodding. She knows, Doctor.
To address a piece of that issue. So I think part of the problem, aside from the budget issues, just the grant process, is that we have seen year after year existing TRCs be closed as a consequence of the grant review process. This last time, 6 TRCs closed and money went to 2 new TRCs. And what I will say about that is I absolutely want to have a TRC in every county in California. So I'm not here to say we don't want new TRCs. It's just the opposite. But with the amount of money we have, it makes no sense to take a TRC that has been functioning. 6 of them are closed down last week, July 1st. 6 closed down. And what does that mean? It means the community, the people who need those services the most, we're having to say to them, sorry, you're in the middle of having treatment from us. We're needing to close. You need to go someplace else. Plus, it's not efficient. It is fiscally wasteful to close programs that have been doing well. So that has been one of the concerns that we have had.
I understand and can certainly feel that concern. When you are going through the granting process, do you require TRCs to show you a funding plan?
Yes, we require that they submit a budget and a budget narrative, and the purpose of the budget narrative is to give us additional insight into what they plan to use that money for. And then, as I mentioned, there's various thresholds we require they meet, one of which is that 75% of the funding is spent on personnel that are going to directly help victims. We also have that time task plan that I mentioned, and that's very important for us. It helps us understand over the course of the 2-year grant period how they plan to meet various goals that they have outlined in their application.
So there's a little bit of a difference in the nuance to my question. My question was, is there a funding plan? And you said yes, but you described a budget. They're separate. A budget will tell me how they're going to spend their money, but a funding plan is going to tell me where they are going to raise money, other streams of income that's going to be coming in. That might be something that we need to start to press on them to put a little bit of pressure on them to start to be a little bit more resilient. And if I'm speaking out of turn, I don't know the full TRC climate out there. I don't know who's funding and who's not funding, but a funding plan will tell me we're going to go after this grant from the KC Foundation. We're going to go after this grant from the foundation, Akonadi Foundation, if you're in the Bay Area. That's a funding plan. And they can say, 2 years ago, we went after this stream of income and we were successful and we brought it in to complement what you're doing. The governor doesn't like to fund new one-off programs, right? He's always, if it's already up and operational, to your point, Doctor, you are more inclined to get money. New programs are very hard in tough economic times. And I agree. I think that's good, sound financial advice. But I also think that funding plans, alternative streams of income, how are they thinking about this program? So it's not solely on our shoulders to fund. But just like your own portfolio, you want diverse multiple streams of income, right? You want to go to work and then you want to go to sleep and still have money coming in, right? And we all want passive income. Well, easier said than done. I get it, but that's just something I'm wondering if there is that type of a question. The stuff in the Bay Area, that I would imagine, might have an easier time. Southern California might have an easier time just because the counties are wealthier. And there are wealthier people down there. LA caught on fire and they had one concert and they raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, just imagine if we could have, Shania Twain do a concert for us. So, go ahead.
I just want to add something about the existing, this program has grown in popularity and resolve even though I've been here just over 5 years now. Initially, there were a handful of TRCs. They applied, they asked for a not very large amount of money, and we were able to fund them all. And we didn't have this every year. We have to, wring our hands and think about who we can fund and who we can't. There is no limit set on statute about how much they can ask for. So we have TRCs who are asking for millions and millions of dollars to fund their program, to expand their program, because they're doing good work and they want to continue it and they want to expand it. And that is to be applauded. But it puts additional pressures on who do you fund and how do you make sure that you're reaching as many people throughout the state of California as you possibly can. So I think it's unfortunately they're a victim of their own success because they're growing. They want to expand. They want to help more people. more people are finding out about this trauma recovery center model and they want to start them in their communities. And so we have this situation where at times we just have more TRCs that are growing, and we are left with this position of if we want to fund those first, and depending on how much they ask for, again, we set this limit when we realized the funding was not going to meet as many of the new TRCs as there are asking for money. So we are trying to find all types of different ways to manage the program within the realities of that we're facing.
Okay, my final question, less on the money and the funding, is are there advocates and partners that are out there that can be making the rounds advocating for money to be allocated in the budget for? You know how there's what do they call it?
I will say the when the general fund money came, oh, there you go. You're in the audience. There you go. Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice have been a strong advocate for this program. And when the general fund money was allocated 3 years ago, they were one of the principal sponsors of that and making that happen. We thank them for their partnership in that. They've been great advocates for
They
CBCB.
successful? Were you-
Californians for Safety and Justice. I believe they're here for public comment. So
Okay,
you'll hear from them.
we'll hurry up and get there.
If I could just say, and just to recognize the role that Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice have played, they were instrumental in working with UCSF on the initial legislation that was passed. They were instrumental in getting Prop 47 passed, and in 2022, they were instrumental in getting a one-time bolus of money allocated for the pilot program that happened. Some of it happened in Napa and Solano County. So we do have some advocates. I will also just say one other thing, and that is that, clearly we are in dire straits right now. We're talking about giving current TRCs X points, but we also recognize if there are now 20 TRCs in California, 9 of them are coming up for renewal. And instead of having that, 10 million, it's going to be like 3 million. So clearly there are going to be cuts. I mean, I know, we all know we need to begin really doing more legislative work on it. One thing I will say is that the way the Trauma Recovery Center is different from other programs is that, as Stacy mentioned, we don't put people in silos. We are also seeing victims like family members of homicide and gun violence. And when you look at where victim money goes in California outside of VCB, it's not really going toward those groups of people. So by eliminating the TRCs, you have crime types that are not going to get services because other grants, you talk about what are we doing to diversify our funding? Other sources of state funding are not funding underserved communities and not funding certain crime types. And so a policy issue is how do we get existing monies to try to cover people that don't usually have access to services?
My final comment, and we don't have to talk about it, I'm just going to put it out there so that it's on the record, is that perhaps my final comment just on the record is that perhaps we should start to also discuss a pool of money or set aside of money that will be available for certain regions for the state of California. So all the Central Valley folks compete for this money, all the Northern California folks compete for this money, all the Southern California folks compete for this money. That way they're a little bit more on equal footing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Cardenas and Board. Before we go to public comment, I'd like to suggest that we take a 10-minute break and then we can come back and hear from our community.
Yeah, we'll reconvene right at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. I think we're going to get ready to take public comment once we hear from our facilitator. But before we start there, I just want to let everyone know we've got a great deal of interest in this topic, and I want to make sure that the board hears from everybody, both in the room and on Zoom. And so we will be limiting public comment to 2 minutes per presenter.
Thank you. Item 5 is public comment. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on the TRC items and information presented today. For those commenting in person, please speak directly into the microphone at the podium or the table. For those participating via Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to offer comment, and we will acknowledge you and let you know when it is your turn to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Burrell. We'll start with any commenters who want to present in the room.
Please come up and make the line here and then come up to the mic to speak.
Good afternoon, Chair and Board. My name is Ed Little, and I'm a Government Affairs Manager with Californians for Safety and Justice and Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. We have long been a strong supporter of the Trauma Recovery Center model, and we were disappointed that 6 trauma recovery centers were defunded in the last grant award cycle. Closing high-performing trauma recovery centers harms the underserved communities most impacted by violent crime. It abruptly discontinues needed services and disrupts community trust and creates additional barriers to care. We recommend prioritizing funding to well-performing existing TRCs. In addition, we strongly support the creation of an ongoing California Trauma Recovery Center Grant Advisory Board. More broadly, California's trauma recovery centers are facing a funding crisis due to the passage of Prop 36. We will continue to advocate for more funding for trauma recovery centers in order to provide the best care to California survivors. With the last minute that I have, I just wanted to just be clear that Californians for Safety and Justice and Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, we have advocated generally for Cal VCB for funding through the budget. We have advocated with the state legislature, with the budget committees, and we will continue to do that, particularly for trauma recovery centers. And we would like to be a resource to the board and to any member of the board who would like to speak with us. As Dr. Bosaleri has mentioned, we were authors of Prop 47, worked with folks who were involved in the establishment of trauma recovery centers. And so we want to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe.
Hello, thank you for having this meeting. My name is Jess Nickel, and I'm a crime survivor of a high-profile crime, which was the kidnapping of Polly Klaas up north in Petaluma. She was my sister. It was a devastating loss with a huge impact on my family, and we clearly needed help, and we got victim compensation accounts set up. So our case received a lot of attention, and we got public validation as victims. We had people helping us navigate the system. By all measures, we were positioned better than most trauma survivors to access the services that we needed. But what I discovered is that even when you have resources, connections, and know-how to work with bureaucracy, the system is almost impossible to navigate. I'm grateful for the funds that we did get, but I also want to highlight some of the challenges that my family and I faced. There are a lot of requirements that Cal VCB has that actually perpetuates harm to victims, such as requiring the therapist to submit detailed notes about your session to Cal VCB that then is going to be submitted for approval about whether your sessions are going to get reimbursed or not. And if you're going through a traumatic healing cycle with a therapist, to have those notes then be submitted to somebody else that you don't know, it's a violation of a person's vulnerability, their privacy. It's not okay, actually. There's another factor with therapy where your sessions are supposed to be 100% crime related. And the thing that happened to me, I was 12 at that time. And it's hard to know what's related really to what. And that's common among crime survivors. And so there's this weird dynamic talking to the therapist, like, can I bring this thing up? Can we talk about this? And it has this kind of ick factor. And one other piece about therapy is there's this unrealistic assumption of what therapy actually costs. So I will end with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Nickel.
Good afternoon. My name is Taya Heisel, and I'm the policy manager at Downtown Women's Center. We are the only organization in Los Angeles dedicated exclusively to serving and empowering women and gender diverse individuals who are experiencing homelessness. We greatly appreciate Cal VCB for your ongoing partnership and your support for trauma recovery centers and the thoughtful discussion today, especially given this budget environment. In partnership with Peace Over Violence, we started our trauma recovery center in 2015. And since 2019, we've served over 2,600 clients with a small but mighty team, consistently exceeding our yearly goals. We provide trauma-informed care in Los Angeles, where 90% of women who are experiencing homelessness have been victimized in some way. With 6 TRCs defunded in the last renewal process, many due to technicalities and a lack of clarity in the application process, those most impacted by violence will suffer. For TRCs like ours, that have been showing up for our community for years, consistent, stable, and transparent funding is crucial. We know how hard that is when our budget environment is anything but stable, but we urge the board to ensure that established TRCs are able to continue serving communities like ours by amending the scoring criteria to clarify requirements for existing TRCs and to prioritize uninterrupted access to care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eisel.
Hello, my name is Sarah Metz, and I have the great fortune of being the director of the UCSF Trauma Recovery Center. With only 2 minutes, I feel like I have so much that I can say, and there's been so many wonderful comments already, and really appreciate the board making this space for us. And I do not envy, the decision making that has to happen, especially in this current landscape. My points, while maybe a little bit in the weeds, since we have this opportunity, I did want to highlight this because I think, Board Member Becton, really thinking about the impact of this process on the agency, I think is really important, especially when we're all seeking to set each other up for success, right, to continue to be able to serve our communities. So these are maybe a little bit granular of feedback in terms of the granting process, but I think important nonetheless. So the timing of when the grant is released in December, that is exceptionally impactful on organizations. That is the holiday season. We have employees that are out. I work in the UC system. Our contracts and grants office closes, and we are required to go through them to submit our applications. So it is a great hardship for us to have the resources that we need in order to meet the deadlines of having the grant submitted during that season of the year. Second, there's not clear guidance on the flow chart, time task plan, or organizational chart. And we have lost significant points in those sections, which absolutely has impacted our funding tier. And yeah, so I got my 30-second warning, so I'll leave it there and certainly could offer much more if there's interest, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Metz.
Hello, my name is Michelle Ornelas Knight, and I'm the director of the UC Davis Trauma Recovery Center. I just wanted to speak. We're one of the newer trauma recovery centers. We received funding last funding cycle. And to answer your question about application process, is it enough time? I think the only reason why we were able to submit a successful application is because we started researching and putting together our thoughts and doing needs assessments 6 months in advance, which included reaching out to established TRCs. to determine, what is needed in order to be a successful trauma recovery center. Although we are affiliated with UC Davis Health, I'm also director of a care center. We specialize in trauma services. And so we've been doing this work for 30 years in the community. So we have established partnerships, but even so, the uniqueness to this, and I know I'm running out of time, Trauma Recovery Center is about accessibility. It's about removing barriers. And so I wanted to also give voice to some of the survivors that we've served. We've been able to build trusting relationships with youth who have never even disclosed previous victims of crime. And they're actually referring others to us because of that established trust. And the flexibility that Trauma Recovery Center offers is what makes it so unique. We're not able to do that with other funding sources. And so it's just such extremely meaningful work because it reduces the barriers to receive these important services. I wish I could say more, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ornelas.
I think I know what I'm doing this time. Thank you for the opportunity to make public comment. The NATRC also has put together a brief summary of issues with the grant award process and recommendations that we would like to leave with the board members today, if that's possible. I think, as everyone I think is saying, the big issue that we see for the short term is defunding the well-performing TRCs while funding new TRCs. And we have some recommended solutions around that in terms of how to think about prioritizing funding for the well-performing existing TRCs so that they're not defunded based on a technicality in the grant application. I think we'll hear from some of the defunded TRCs that I see here today about how, because they didn't state that they would be able to offer services 7 or 6 times in every narrative question, that they lost a lot of points throughout the application for that, and that resulted in them being defunded, although they are able to offer services in 30 days. We're included in these recommendations are some sample language from the state of New Jersey for how they describe awarding those 10 points, or suggestions around changing that component of the current 7 to 10 point tier scoring criteria. One other short-term recommendation I want to mention is the creation of an ongoing California TRC Grant Advisory Board. It's really, I think, a best practice, and we definitely see that in other states where an advisory board composed of survivors of violence, composed of representatives of multiple California TRCs, as well as content experts in the model, would be part of that board, potentially meeting with CalVCB on a quarterly basis to have ongoing opportunities for dialogue and discussion about the grant. So thank you very much. Is it possible to leave these with you? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wiggall. Is there any other public comment from our participants in the room? Okay, we will start on Zoom then. I see Martha Wade has her hand up. Ms. Wade?
Thank you. My name is Martha Wade. I'm the founder and executive director of A Quarter Blue. A Quarter Blue exists today because I received these wraparound services when the church where I met my perpetrator put a lien on his home that covered my cost of therapy and the therapy of my parents. I had well over 50 sessions, and they literally saved my life. And now Orange County is left with no trauma recovery center. This is not just a loss of funding, it is a loss of access, hope, and safety for more than 3 million people. The TRC grant mandate states this care shall be provided in a manner that increases access to services and removes barriers to care for victims of violent crime. How is this mission being fulfilled when Orange County residents now face up to 4 to 5 hours of round-trip travel to see a qualified TRC therapist? That is not trauma-informed, that is not accessible, that is not justice. We are now forced to return to a system that has proven unreliable. A Quarter Blue must again rely on CB billing, yet 4 years ago we were denied reimbursement for over $10,000 in services. That is not sustainable or equitable model for survivors or for nonprofits who serve them. Without early accessible trauma recovery care, we risk increased homelessness, addiction, human trafficking, and suicide. And this is not hypothetical. This is what happens when trauma goes untreated. California has the opportunity and the responsibility to lead the way in how we care for survivors of crime. Please look again at the current California map of funded TRCs. Ask yourselves, should access to trauma recovery exist only in a few regions when violent crime reaches every corner of our state? Survivors deserve support no matter where they live. For the sake of those still suffering in silence, for those just beginning their healing journey, and for those who never got a chance, stand in the gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Let's see, Wendy Blanco has her hand up. Ms. Blanco.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking the time to listen to public comment. My name is Wendy Blanco. I am the Director of Counseling Services and Trauma Recovery at Peace Over Violence, which is a co-funded TRC with Downtown Women's Center. So I am here representing Peace Over Violence, but also giving some feedback around like a private practice owner in Los Angeles and some of the barriers that exist in that realm as well. So first, I want to just say thank you so much for being trauma informed. This meeting really started off being collaborative and curious, which wasn't always our experience in these meetings. And so I'm very humbled to hear that there is curiosity about the process, and then also questioning the intent around why do we do the things that we do. I think that was really critical. I'm thinking about, we understand that we're under unprecedented times, which require unprecedented and creative solutions. So I'm really happy to hear that the different efforts and different recommendations. And I just want to echo what Dr. B has recommended, and Dr. B has been in this fight for a long time, and really a champion for the TRCs. And so I want to echo her recommendations. And just thinking about as a provider of private practice, I also want to appreciate the survivor that stood up and talked about the barriers that she experienced, because I, as a owner, have also experienced those things where, approvals have to be submitted in order for people to continue services. Often after the third session, an approval has to go in, a treatment plan. If it's not approved, then the client is on a standstill. And as a person who is committed to trauma-informed services, I never allow like that lapse to happen, which then turns into me not getting reimbursed for those sessions. And so I believe the TRCs was a remediation to some of these things, the lack of access or the lack of like sufficient reimbursement for services, but also—
Ms. Blanco, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are at time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Let's see, Ms. Petros has her hand up.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Petros. I am the executive director with Mothers Against Murder, a nonprofit victim advocacy organization, the agency that prevailed last year in the writ of mandate against Cal v. CB, impacting positive changes to the entire California's crime victims. Thank you for holding this public meeting. It is a necessary step toward building trauma recovery infrastructure and ensuring vital services reach survivors. But what's most urgent and still unresolved is fixing the broken performance of California victim compensation itself. We cannot build on a faulty foundation. The board must confront its administrative cost and misuse of funds. For decades, the cost to operate this program has been disproportionately high compared to what is actually paid to victims. Nearly 40 years ago, 60 Minutes exposed this very same systemic failures that continue today. Quoting directly from the 60 Minutes segment in late 80s, State Assembly member Charles Calderon said, if this program were a private corporation, that private corporation would be bankrupt. Senator Art Torres told Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes, the facts are clear. You have incompetency, you have people that have not been paid
from a program that we told them we would pay them from. It's boggling the mind what kind of decision making is going on over there. That was
I'm sorry,
my
Ms. Petros,
meeting.
we are at time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petros. I see Mr. Manley has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, board members. My name is John Manley. I'm an attorney, and my firm represents survivors of sexual assault exclusively. We have for years. I was the lead counsel on the Nassar case, and I've done thousands of cases. And what you have here in a situation in California is we spend $1 billion a year approximately treating felons in state prison with mental health. And now, thanks to our governor, and I'm not a Republican, I want to make that clear, thanks to our governor, victims are getting nothing. Their perpetrators get health or mental health care, and they are getting nothing. I've represented thousands of victims, little children, 3-year-olds whose first sexual experience is rape, and now you're going to cut it. And I'm not directing it at you, I'm directing it at the governor. It's wrong. And your job as board members is to represent victims, and you can do something, which is pass a resolution condemning this. We're actually cutting funding for victims, mental health services, so we can prosecute criminals and send them to prison where they're going to get more mental health care than their victims. That is insane. And you should do something. You should say something. You can raise your hand, and you should, and I hope you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Is there any additional comment on Zoom? Ms. Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Tina Rodriguez, the founder and director of Beloved Survivors Trauma Recovery Center in Central California. We serve between Stanislaus County and up into Tulare County. And it's already been shared. I don't need to repeat the geographic lack of equity with the distribution of funds. While I do appreciate that being elevated by the board, it's not the first time. It was 2 fiscal years brought up 2 fiscal years ago with an emphasis on a need that was unmet. So I don't know if this year it'll make a difference or not. And it's not specific to the organization that I run. There's a need here regardless of who gets funded. And I hope that that's a priority at some point next time around. And I have done my due diligence just advocating for equity with access to all of the funds and informing as many people as I can about other funds so that they can develop diversified budgets within their organization and be more successful and sustainable long term. I also want to mention CalVCB did do a really good job of informing people this last round about the RFP. I did see it in multiple different areas and it was distributed widely. I do appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Is there an additional comment on Zoom? Well, there was less public comment than I anticipated. So not all of our commenters got to say everything that they wanted to. So I'd like to invite anybody either on Zoom or in person to come and address the board. Yes, please, Ms. Nickel.
Yeah, hello. The main point that I actually wanted to make with all of the challenges that I navigated in therapy is that if it's this hard for me and my family, I can only imagine what it's like for the majority of crime survivors to navigate a bunch of red tape and bureaucracy. And when you're in a place of shock and your life is shattered, even when you have know-how to deal with bureaucracy, it's nearly impossible. And my sister actually gave up when she was in a high place of need. And so to address this, it's like the TRCs come in and serve a real need for people, the majority of crime survivors that just don't get support. They're denied for a variety of reasons. They don't know about it. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but yeah, that's my main thing. Like, it was hard for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nickel, and I'm so sorry for the horrible trauma that your family suffered.
Say one more thing, and that is when you look at the statute that governs the TRC, it's actually written in a very permissive way. So it says that the board shall administer a program to evaluate applications and award grants to trauma recovery centers. And it goes on to state that the board can use any other related criteria. So it's actually quite permissive. So for you all, I think you do have the authority to look at the way it's been administered at this point. And then the section goes on to say that the trauma recovery sites shall be selected by the board through a well-defined selection process. And this well-defined process, it doesn't limit or restrict how you go about doing it. So I just want to point that out, that at times we've been told our hands are tied, we have to do it the way we're doing it. And yet, as someone who was involved in helping to write up the initial legislation, I believe that it's quite permissive in that regard.
Thank you for that insight, Dr. Masalari. See, Ms. Petros has her hand up.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll be quick. What I address is back in late 80s, and I want to say today, still, victims face delays, denials, and disrespect, even more retaliation and intimidation when we speak up against the cruelty and the incompetence. You cannot discuss trauma recovery while denying your own trauma-producing practices until CalVCB publicly addresses its operational dysfunction and recenter staff. I think these hearings will only pretend to seek justice. You could do it. Please consider and listen to what we're saying. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Petros. And Ms. Wade has her hand up.
Just another aspect of CalVCB that I'd like to be revisited. I understand it is the model, but we had a case where there were 17 John Does. It was called the Manny case, where a trusted care provider through care.com, I believe it was found out to be a pedophile. And they ended up suing the agency and receiving a settlement of $100,000. And the teenage client had to pay $10,000 back out of his $100,000 settlement to CalVCB for the mental health services he received through A Quarter Blue. He's 18, and that's something that he could have poured into his future. He wants to become a police officer and make a difference. And I think that's another aspect of CalVCB that needs to be revisited, that a settlement from the abuse that's taken place shouldn't go back into their therapy for something that they didn't cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. I see Mr. Pilpe has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I just wanted to bring up this. We've been discussing whether, where the funding can and should go, new centers to support people who need it, or centers who are currently providing services. But the truth is that they're both needed and very potentially can work together to continue the growth. Meaning centers who have been successful maybe can receive funding to support these new centers so that they don't have 5 or 10 years of figuring it out, but have the expertise. Because it's true, we need more centers, but we also need to support the communities that we have been supporting. I am a therapist. I am from Restorative Pathways. So I work directly with these clients, and everyone's right. I've heard the stories, I've seen the tears. It is my job to sit with them while this happens. And we do need more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pilpe. Okay, I think looks like we've reached the conclusion of our public comment. Are there any additional questions or comments from board members? I'd just like to thank all our presenters today and all our public commenters. This has been really informative for me and very impactful to hear the stories from the providers and the beneficiaries of the system. And I want to thank the staff for putting this on and all the work that went into it. So is there any other business that needs to come before the board this afternoon? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Cohen. Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone, for all your input. The next meeting is scheduled, the next board meeting, I'm sorry, is scheduled to occur on September 18th, 2025. Thank you all.